Hello, it's Robert Schwemmer, and welcome to my channel where we explore above and below the sea and from the air. This journey, we will explore the Limekiln State Park, focused on some of the early history of the Rockland Lime and Lumber Company. I have passed this park so many times but never visited. I am so glad. What a gem. So I decided to make Kerr Creek my campsite as the home base with its great ocean vistas. It's only about 10 minutes south of the Limekiln State Park. Both Kerr Creek and the Limekiln campsites require well in advance reservations to guarantee a spot, sometimes 6 months. I suggest at least a 2-day minimum just because there's so much to see in the area and hike and relax.
Be here in the autumn when all the colors call. Be the burning memory of all the summers gone.
The 700 acres that make up the park are located where the San Lucia Mountains and the Los Padres National Forest along the legendary Big Sur coastline meet the stunning seascapes of the Monterey Bay National Marine Sanctuary. Traveling southbound, Limekiln State Park is 52 miles south of Carmel. Traveling north, the park is 37 miles north of the nearest town of San Simeon. Day use fee is $10 with discounts offered to the military and senior citizens, so best to check online so if you have the exact change because it's self-registration. About a dozen developed campsites sit along the trees near the creek. Several ocean view sites on the beach are perfect for watching seabirds and sunsets over the Pacific Ocean and rolling waves. The trails offer peaceful solitude, breathtaking waterfalls. Easy half-mile walk leads you up across 3 scenic bridges and 1 easy water crossing to this enormous kilns or furnaces that once supplied lime used for the mortar in San Francisco's brick buildings. Unfortunately, 2 other trails were closed due to storm damage. Definitely will return because there are these 100-foot waterfalls. The Redwood Forest has been threatened by forest fires going back decades, and even recently, including the old growth being clear-cut to provide fuel for the mighty furnaces, as well as being harvested for export. But they too are resilient. Burnt trees are now providing a substrate to grow new trees. Where there's death, there's new life. John Muir describes it best addressing the mighty sequoias. And I quote, "Sequoias, king of their race, growing close together like grass in a meadow, poised, their brave domes and spires in the sky 300 feet above the ferns and the lilies that enabled the ground, towering serene through the long centuries, preaching God's forestry fresh from heaven." John Muir, 1897, end quote. I was able to get into some deep research here. The Rockland Lime and Lumber Company had business roots in Maine. During the late 19th century, Francis Cobb II dominated the lime industry in Rockland, Maine, and elsewhere in the state. Unionism and labor unrest pushed Cobb to seek opportunities out of state, eventually landing him in California. He was directed to a property in the sparsely settled and undeveloped Big Sur coastline. Cobb's son-in-law, James S. Hanley, purchased the land south of Lucia in the present-day state park. On May 20th, 1887, the company was incorporated in San Francisco and immediately set to developing infrastructure elements such as a large-scale lime operation. Hanley and a group of 30 men began constructing roads, bridges, structures, mills, kilns. By the spring of 1888, 2 patent kilns were already in operation, and they were eventually added 2 more. Through 1888, 3,000 barrels of lime were shipped from Rockland Landing, and we'll get into that in a minute. In 1888, the Monterey Democrat newspaper reported that operations at Rockland, and I quote, "give employment for 100 men as coopers, hoop, stave, and woodcutter, carpenters, firemen, teamsters, quarrymen, etc." End quote. In addition, the structures on the property included 10 dwelling houses, a stable, coppersmith, blacksmith, and tool houses. I'm always fascinated by brickmakers' marks. I have found them as a maritime historian on shipwrecks that were used in either stoves, maybe boilers, but T-car is what you see here stamped, and they're often found as T.CARR. They're highly durable, apparently, antique refractory and fire bricks, and they were manufactured in the UK during the 19th and 20th centuries. They were produced by Thomas Carr & Son in Newcastle upon Tyne, and were widely used in copper smelting furnaces and kilns, which is perfect for this operation. In October 1888, U.S. Coast and Geodetic Survey map plots Hanley's Landing at the location of Rockland Landing. The map illustrates a chute that projects southeast from the point at Rockland Landing. During production of the map, the landing named after J.S. Hanley, the president and manager of the Rockland and Lumber Company. Following this, the 1890 U.S. Coast and Geodetic Survey map illustrates Rockland Landing with a smokestack and a warehouse. This 1890 map reflects a description provided by Ireland. At this date, the company is operating full scale and employing a cable chute and a donkey engine to transport freight from land to schooner. Of course, this could be a sailing schooner, this can be a steam schooner. The Coast and Geodetic Survey for 1904 describes Limekiln smokestack and Limekiln warehouse. The warehouse was a whitewashed building measuring 90 feet long and located on the cliffside bluff above the ocean. The smokestack was a structure and a hoisting engine approximately 10 feet high and 10 feet from the warehouse. But the Rockland Landing, just a side note, as a maritime historian, I've studied what they call doghole ports. And these ports extended from Monterey County all the way up to Mendocino County. And similar to this landing, they were referred to as doghole ports because they were so small a dog could barely turn around in them. So at the Rockland Landing, there was a steel cable, probably about an inch diameter, 1,000 feet long, that extended out to a heavy anchor that was laid in 10 fathoms or 60 feet of water. And divers have located an anchor offshore. Quite possibly that could be the original anchor. Design is unknown, but a captain was said to be under the wire when his schooner was properly positioned for loading about 400 feet offshore. A pallet or basket, could be a bucket or a box, was hung from a traveler that rode the cable on wheels. Another cable probably ran from the pallet to a winch at the chute house on shore. The exact rigging is not known. The winch, powered by, of course, the steam donkey engine, lowered the load pallet to the ship and pulled back the empty pallet. The process was reversed if the ship was bringing in supplies to be unloaded. Steam schooners were normally used because they could maneuver into position, and a smart captain, as in this illustration, which is an example, would point his bow to the sea for a quick departure just in case the storm arose or the swell came up without warning. The Rockland Lime and Lumber Company ceased operations in 1890 after about 3 years. There are several factors that apply to the rapid dissolution of the company. First, the limestone deposit was much thinner than initially anticipated. The quarry existed on a cliff below a rock talus that only proved 100 to 150 feet. Secondly, the inexhaustible supply of forests soon demonstrated limited capacity, pushing the company to distant canyons to maintain the continuously burning kilns and the need to construct lime barrels. And thirdly, the distance to market and the difficulty of loading and transporting lime on a schooner may have played a factor. Well, I sure hope you enjoyed visiting the Limekiln State Park and learning about the Rockland Lime and Lumber Company's history as much as I had researching it. And a shout out to Jason Field's great body of work, his thesis on the Big Sur doghole ports. And thank you to my loyal subscribers always. And if you're new to the channel, I hope you consider subscribing and liking this video and sharing your experiences visiting the park or other places nearby. Thank you.